Hello, everybody. Welcome to Plano Public Library's Illustrator Basics program. My name is Anna Kopinska. I am a public services librarian at Parr Library, and I am joined today by Aisha. Aisha, can you say hello?
Hi, I'm Aisha. I'm a librarian here at Haggard.
Aisha is going to be our chat moderator. So if you have questions, I am currently sharing my screen and it is the only screen in front of me. So she is actually going to be taking your questions and relaying them to me. So you will hear her lovely voice interrupt me, hopefully several times, as she relays your questions. Today, we are going to be talking about Illustrator. And Illustrator is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud, which is Adobe's kind of professional creative design software suite. Illustrator is a software used to create vector images. And vector graphics, there's a difference between raster images and vector graphics. Raster images are uh, made with pixels and they are based on a grid. So if you zoom in really far into a picture, you will eventually start seeing the grid of squares, right? And each square is a separate color that when zoomed out really far creates a picture. That is a raster image. However, a vector graphic is based on a mathematical formula. If you draw a shape like a circle, then it has 4 points around the circle, and it kind of dictates like a quadratic formula, for example, of the smooth curves that from this point to this point, it is this kind of a formula. From this point to this point, it is this kind of a formula. I don't want that to scare you. There is no math involved in Illustrator. Illustrator does all of the math for you. But the great thing about vector graphics is that vector graphics can scale infinitely. So you can work on something that is as tiny as a logo on a business card, and you can then blow it up and put it on a billboard, and there's no loss of resolution. They never pixelate. Illustrator is primarily used by graphic designers, artists, illustrators, and web designers to create things like logos, icons, and of course, illustrations. So today we are going to be creating a very simple illustration. It's going to look something like this, not necessarily identical, uh, but the reason why we are creating something like this is because after we are done with our illustration in Illustrator, we can actually do something in After Effects, which is another one of our classes, and we can, I hope that you can see this video playing. We can animate it so that the sun spins, the bird flies around, the boat goes up and down, the waves go from side to side, so on and so forth. So I hope that you are excited about the possibilities with that. Illustrator is a great kind of beginning animation software if that's the route that you choose to go. But of course, we can create static images as well. Illustrator is all about creating static images. After Effects is the program that creates the movement, the motion. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So in your Adobe Creative Cloud, you should have Illustrator and you should be able to open it. And when you open it, oops, no. So that's the working file. But when we open Illustrator, and I do want you to see what Illustrator looks like the first time that you open it because it is just a little bit different. It can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Illustrator wants to show you all of the different possibilities that you can create with, basically. And, oh, okay. Sometimes there's pop-ups showing you all of the new features that they have added since the last update. But what we are going to want to do is we are going to want to create a new file, which is up here. You can, of course, open other files, but for this one, we are going to open a new file. And here in the new document panel, you can see that we have a lot of options. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller. We have recent. So I tend to work in letter-sized things because I tend to print things on letter-sized paper a lot. But you can create things for a different variety of formats. So you can see up top we have this bar that shows us different options, and we can create things for mobile. And if we did, we can see what an iPhone 10 screen is. So it's 1,125 pixels by 2,436 pixels. I wouldn't have known that off the top of my head, but you can see all presets and you can kind of get the idea of the different common mobile interfaces. I am actually going to be creating a film video, and for this, we are going to want to do a 1080. The, when we talk about these document presets, it doesn't necessarily mean if I'm creating a film video preset that I can't print this preset later. What this means, though, is that it kind of automatically chooses a variety of options for me. So it chooses how wide my screen is, right? So 1920 pixels by 1080. I want it to be landscape orientation because theoretically we're going to be creating a video animation from this. If you want to, you do not have to. That is just the option for later on. And then it asks us how many artboards we want. Artboards are kind of like the number of pages in a book, or the number of canvases in a paint shop, I guess. So we are just going to be working with one artboard today. Bleed is something that you would have to worry about if you were doing some printing. A lot of professional printers will incorporate some bleed so that the print is actually bigger than the paper so that the print stretches all the way from side to side without having any white margins of the paper. So that's what bleed is. And then there's color mode. Color mode can either be RGB color or CMYK color. RGB color is great for screens if you're just going to save something maybe and save it for the web and you're not really planning to print it. CMYK color, if you're even thinking about printing something, it is always best to work in CMYK color first. CMYK color, printers are a little bit more limited in the colors that they can produce as opposed to our screens. Our screens can show these vibrant, bright colors that are just saturated with beautiful popping color hues. And printers, unfortunately, depending on the printer, of course, but printers are a little bit more limited in their range of color. So it's typically best to work in CMYK color to make sure that the colors that you're choosing are actually able to be reproduced on a piece of paper as opposed to just looking nice on your screen and looking kind of bland on the paper. So because we are planning to animate this later on, or I am planning to animate this later on, I'm going to keep this in RGB color because that is great for screens. And then raster effects. This kind of determines how well Illustrator rasters the image. So as I mentioned before, these are kind of based on mathematical formulas, and Illustrator can go into these with a lot of detail. Raster kind of determines how much detail it's going to try to output. And then preview mode default, that's fine. So once again, we've got our 1080 pixels. We've got one artboard. We've got RGB color for screens. We've got screen raster effects, and we are going to create. And then we get something like this, and it looks crazy. So because it knows that we're trying to work in video, it's already kind of created these safety guidelines for us, these green lines. These are just kind of the rulers of how many pixels we have across the screen. And these are kind of the safety margins. So a lot of people tend to focus on what's in the middle of their screen, and sometimes they won't notice things outside of these boxes, basically. So that is what is in the middle. But what about all around? This is a completely new program to us. What are we doing? So Uh, in our workspace, we have a few options. We've got our menu bar right up here. So if you've ever used Microsoft Word or anything like that, this should be fairly similar to you. It features standard menu options such as File, where you can save. It features Edit, where you can undo and redo and do some other things as well. It features some other options like Window, where you can arrange different pop-ups to help you with tools in Illustrator. And of course, there's help. So that's our menu bar at the very top. At the very top, though, we also have this, which says Switch Workplace. And this is actually something that I'm going to do. Typically, when you open Illustrator for the first time, it's going to open in Essentials. And the thing is, I have been using Illustrator since 2010. And so I am very used to Essentials Classic. And I don't know why anybody would choose not to use the Essentials Classic, and I'll explain why. Right now we have the menu bar, and then right underneath it, we have the bar that shows our window, right? However, if we go to Essentials Classic, at the top we have our menu bar, and then underneath it, we have something called the options bar. And this options bar gives us a lot of control over the tools that we select in the toolbar. So the options bar will change depending on what tool we select. So I hope that you saw that difference between the text tool and the triangle tool or the rectangle tool. The text tool gives me options like character, and it allows me to change what font I'm using. Um, in other tools, it allows us to do other things as well. Um, Basically, I'm just very used to this bar being able to fine tune and control my tools, which I select from my toolbar on the left. One thing to note about the toolbar is that just because we see these two rows of icons and gosh, I don't know how many rows, it's a lot. Just because we see all of these tools, that doesn't mean those are all of the tools that Illustrator has. You'll notice in the bottom right corner of a lot of the tools, there's this little triangle icon. And that little triangle icon means that there are other tools that are similar to that tool that have been grouped together into kind of like a folder. So if I long click, you will see that that folder kind of opens up and I can select either the type tool, the area type tool, all of these other kind of typing tools that deal with text that are similar but not exactly the same and kind of do different functions. So I could choose one of the other ones and that would change what tool is on the top at that point. I could also do that for any of the tools that have that triangle feature. So for example, the rectangle tool also has the rounded rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, the polygon tool, the star tool, flare tool. Lots of tools are grouped together and they try to make the palettes as similar as possible, but sometimes if you're looking for a tool and you just can't find it, you're going to have to do some digging, unfortunately. Okay, so this right here in the middle, uh, this screen is called our document window, and it's also referred to as the workspace. And this is the area where the image you are working on shows up. Pretty simple. You can see that we can have multiple tabs open. So we can have our the current file that we are working on and other files as well if we are trying to work on multiple files at the same time. And we can just kind of switch between them if we would like. And each one would have its own workspace. or document window. The artboard is set by this black rectangle right here. And these are similar to pages. These show in the document window and allow you to work on multiple illustrations at once in the same file. So just kind of like we can have a Word document with maybe 6 pages open, we can have an Illustrator file with 6 artboards and then a separate Illustrator file with maybe 2 artboards. And if you ever want to add an artboard, there is, of course, the artboard tool in the toolbar, which allows you to draw yet another artboard, which you can do freeform or you can choose from a preset kind of size. So last but not least, all these things on the right here. We have a lot of them. These are called panels, and panels can collapse, they can expand, or they can collapse. And you can see that as we kind of expand these, they have different kind of features to them. Panels ideally are supposed to help you. If you see some panels on mine that you do not see on your screen, you usually are able to open a panel by going to the window menu in the menu bar and then choosing from one of the many windows, for example, Pathfinder. And then normally what happens is Pathfinder opens up in a separate dialog box, and you are then able to kind of dock it to a panel if you would like to kind of customize your interface. So we are going to finally get on to the fun part, the illustration part, right? We are here to learn how to illustrate. So I am going to start off with a rectangle, just a very simple rectangle. And I'm going to make it just as big as the canvas, the artboard rather. You'll notice that if I zoom in, and there are many ways to zoom in. Before I zoom in, there are many ways to zoom in. There is the zoom tool if you would like, which you can click on a certain area and it zooms in on that area for you. If you hold down the Alt key and then click, it will zoom out for you. You can click and drag. Woo. And if you drag to the left, it zooms out. If you drag to the right, it zooms in. And I don't know why my screen is doing that. I think maybe it's just a little overwhelmed on processing power right now. So we can zoom in using the zoom tool. Other ways of using the zoom is Control minus on the keyboard and Control plus on the keyboard. You can zoom in and out that way. So Control minus zooms out, Control plus zooms in. The way that I like zooming in is I like just having the regular cursor, the selection tool, the black arrow. That's kind of the default cursor. And for zooming in purposes, I like to hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, and I like to use the scroll wheel on my mouse. So if I scroll up, I zoom in, and if I scroll down, I zoom out. So all that to say, we created a rectangle with the rectangle tool by clicking and dragging from, I like starting from the top left to the bottom right, but you can click and drag in opposite corners in whichever manner you would like. And I made my rectangle slightly bigger than my artboard. Of course, you can make the rectangle bigger or smaller just using the selection tool. Typically, when you're working in Illustrator, you might use one of these tools for a moment, and then you're going to go right back to the selection tool. The selection tool is kind of the default tool that you're going to be using. If I was trying to resize the rectangle tool using the rectangle tool, it might work, but it might just also create a new rectangle. So I would recommend always going back to that selection tool, the black arrow. So with the selection tool, you can resize. If you kind of hover over the corner, you can see that the cursor changes to a kind of twisty arrow thing, and that allows you to rotate the shape in whatever direction you want. And you can see Illustrator is telling you the degrees of which you are rotating to. If you want more exact degrees, you can hold down the Shift key. And when you hit rotate, it starts to only rotate in 45-degree angles. It would help if I was doing this in the right angle. Yeah, there we go. So we can rotate in Illustrator. Other things that we can do in Illustrator with a simple rectangle, we can do a lot. With the option bar, we can change the color. So if we click on this white down here, we can choose any one of the colors from down here. These are kind of preset swatches that Illustrator chooses for us. But of course, we can open up our panel and choose a color from our color panel instead, if we would like. So I'm going to choose kind of a light blue. This black right here, I don't think that we can see it very well just because this is such a big rectangle. But if I increase the stroke, I hope that you're able to see there is a black outline to this rectangle. And theoretically, we would be able to change the outline's color. So maybe to red. For this rectangle though, I don't need an outline. So I'm just going to choose this white square with the red line running through it. And that gives me no outline on my rectangle. And it is outlineless and just a full filled in shape. Okay. Other things that we can do with the selection tool and our rectangle. You'll see these little circles in the corners, in each corner. And with these circles, we can round out the edges pretty far, actually. These circles appear pretty much anytime that you have a point in Illustrator. And they will allow you to soften that point and give it a round, smooth edge. So you'll see with the selection tool, when I click and drag on one of those circles, all of the points moved around. However, we also have the direct selection tool, and I want to talk about the direct selection tool a little bit as well. The direct selection tool and the selection tool look very similar, and I think that's by purpose, but with the direct selection tool, you can choose just one corner of the rectangle. So for example, you saw me click just on the top left corner. I can click on that circle and you can see instead of all of the corners getting rounded, it's just that top left corner that's getting rounded now. And similarly, you can move just the anchor point of the rectangle. So these little squares, it's really, really hard to see, but I hope that you can see when I hover over the points, there's this little white square on the tip of my cursor. And when I click that square, it turns blue. That blue square lets me move the anchor point around. That blue square is the anchor point. And when I click it, that says that I have selected that anchor point specifically. So I can move the anchor point around and change the shape dramatically, right? So maybe it's now a trapezoid instead of a rectangle. Mm, or I think that's still a trapezoid. I don't remember my basic geometry anymore. I'm sorry. Um, but with the direct selection tool, you are able to move just those individual anchor points around, and you can alter shapes pretty drastically with that. To kind of illustrate this point, I'm going to quickly create an ellipse, kind of in this gray area right here. So you can see here is our ellipse. It has 4 anchor points as well. And if I move this anchor point around, I can almost create like a crescent moon banana shape. I'm not really sure what to call this shape, but pretty drastically, I have created something much different than an ellipse just by moving 2 anchor points around. And I hope that you see how it's doing that. So it's keeping all of the other anchor points in place, right? These 2 were our original anchor points. We moved this one from over here and this one from over here. And it's just making sure that this anchor point connects to this anchor point. This anchor point connects to this anchor point. And these are connected by lines. I am going to see if I can create a few new layers because I don't know if you can see this blue line very well on my screen, but I'm wondering if I move it to the red. Hopefully you can see that red a little bit better against the gray. This red line is an anchor handle, and we can move this as well, and this just kind of dictates the curve of the line. So if it's going straight across, I tend to think of these handles and their endpoints almost like little forces of gravity, that the line has to kind of be pulled in by their gravitational force before it travels onward to its next destination, to its next anchor point. So if we move around these handles, we can create some very different shapes. A bean. Okay. The other thing that we can do with the direct selection tool is we can convert this anchor point either to a corner point or to a smooth point. So if I convert it to a corner point, you can see there it's now a teardrop shape almost. And once again, we have that circle that allows us to smooth that edge out if we would like or not. I'm going to keep it pointed. And we can also remove an anchor point if we should wish. So I can remove that anchor point, and now my oval only has 3 points, which is 1 over here, 2 here, and 3. So now maybe that looks more like a guitar pick. Okay. So I hope this little exploration with anchor points has helped you kind of grasp how Illustrator works. Because we are about to dive into the actual creation process. We have our blue sky in the background, but we need some ocean waves, and we are going to get started on that. So the very front waves, what we can do is we can actually create a rectangle. I'm going to make it a deeper blue color than that. Oh, that's a little too deep. There we go. That's pretty nice. And by using the direct selection tool, I can alter this anchor point here and turn it into a smooth point. And then kind of make sure that it goes up a little bit. And then this point I want to turn into a smooth point as well. And I want to make sure that that anchor point goes down a little bit. And here we have the start of our ocean waves. If we would like our ocean to be a little bit choppier than this, we can definitely do so. For that, we would want to add anchor points to this little section. And to do that, we would use the pen tool. I want to make sure that I have my blue shape selected with my selection tool, and then I am clicking on the pen tool, which kind of looks like a calligraphy ink pen. And when I do that, I can click on the path and you'll see the cursor has a little plus icon on it. And I can add anchor points. So then when I go back to my direct selection tool, I can make this anchor point go down and up. And I can make that anchor point go down and up. And I can make that anchor point go down and up. And that one go further down. Okay, so I hope that we are seeing ocean waves, some choppy ocean. We can make the handles longer to get a little bit more intense increases into our waves. Okay. Next up, we want to create we're going to create 3 layers of waves. And next up, we are going to create our middle layer of waves. And one of the easiest ways of creating shapes in Illustrator is using the pencil tool. So the pencil tool is usually hidden under the shaper tool. But if you hit N on the keyboard, it should automatically choose the pencil for you. Or of course, you can just find it under the shaper tool. And the pencil tool works just how you would expect. You are going to click and drag, and you are going to create some ocean waves. And for the pencil tool, for this middle layer of waves, you want to make sure that you're creating a full shape, right? Like a whole line that starts and ends at the same point. You'll see my cursor changed to a pencil with a little circle on the bottom right. And that circle means that I am completing the shape. The shape is complete. And when I do that, right now, my shape has no fill and no stroke, but I can change that pretty easily by going into my options bar and changing that. So one thing you'll notice pretty immediately is that we are having an issue with our layers. We have the sky in the background. We have these waves, and then we have these waves on top. We want these waves to actually be underneath the waves over here. And there are several ways that we can kind of accomplish this. You can, of course, have multiple objects in the same layer. And so if we wanted to keep these in the same layer, we can arrange and then send backward. And that would allow us to kind of make sure that our waves are in place where we want them. And that works. However, because I am planning on animating this in the future, I want to make sure that my waves are on separate layers. And I can do that by going to the layers panel. You have seen me do this already, but I didn't explain what I was doing. So in the layers panel, layers can be thought of kind of like as transparencies. And you can have multiple things on the same transparency, and you can kind of arrange this order of transparencies however you would like. So I am going to rename my layer 1 as sky. I'm going to rename layer 1 as, or layer 2 as front waves. And then there's going to be a layer 3, which is going to be middle waves. And right now, I actually have both of my waves in my front waves layer. So I'm just going to click and drag my path. If I click on this circle next to the path, you'll see it selects it on the workspace. And I am able to click and drag it to my middle waves layer. And that just allows me to kind of keep things a little bit more organized and keep things a little bit more separate. And now we are going to create yet another layer. This one is going to be back waves. And I really want to emphasize, we could have created the middle waves the same way that we created the front waves, right? But because this is a tutorial trying to show you the basics of Illustrator, I'm trying to show you as many possible ways to create waves as possible. So this third way is definitely not the way that I would normally do things, but we are going to explore our options. And that's a really good way of thinking about it. So first things first, I created my rectangle. So again, clicking from top left to bottom right, clicking and dragging, and then just letting go. I am going to change the color in my options bar to a lighter blue. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm going to extend this because I know what's about to happen and kind of make it even bigger. And then again, in my layers panel, I can hide this behind the middle waves or move it behind the middle waves. Now, right now, this doesn't look very wavy. It does, to be fair, the ocean horizon is usually a straight line, but we want it to be a fun illustration and kind of give it that effect of waves. So we are actually going to go to the menu bar and go to the effect panel. And under distort and transform, we are going to roughen this shape. And when you do, it looks crazy. Just bear with me for a moment. One of the things that we want to do is we want to change this pop-up box that shows up. We want to change from relative size to absolute size. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to increase the detail. No. We want to increase the size pretty far. And I think decrease the detail to maybe 2. And maybe smooth it out a little bit. So those look like some really crazy waves. I'm wondering, if maybe 1 would be better. Yeah, I think 1 is good. So this roughen effect is applied to the edge of our entire shape, and we can resize our shape, and you'll see that it still tries to keep that roughen effect going, even if we extend it super far. So that's one really great way of adding texture to a shape if you want it to be kind of crazy without necessarily drawing all of those details yourself. There are many other effects in the effect window or drop down. There are other distort and transform effects that are really fun to play around with. I really like twist as well. And you can play around with these and different shapes to kind of see what they can do. But for our waves, I think that looks pretty good. I think I'm just going to move our waves down by clicking and dragging. And now we have some layers of waves. And we have enough sky so that we can add in a sun. So once again, I am going to, if you ever choose to change your roughen effect, let's say that you decide, actually, I want a little bit more detail than this. I want my waves to look a little bit rougher, or maybe I want my waves to not be as intense as this. You can go to the appearance panel, and the appearance panel, when you have the shape selected, will show you any effects that you have applied. And when you click on that effect, you get the dialog box again, and you can pick up right where you left off and change the settings if you would like. Okay, so that's the appearance panel. Next up, though, we are going to create the sun. And I'm going to rename it sun. And our sun is going to be not a blue circle, but just a regular circle. One thing that I should note that I did, I chose the ellipse tool from the toolbar, right? But when I clicked and dragged, I didn't just click and drag. You'll notice that no matter where I'm clicking and dragging, it stays in a perfect circle shape. That's because I'm holding down the shift key. And anytime that you want a perfect shape, so either like a square instead of a rectangle or a circle instead of an ellipse, you can hold down the shift key and it will resize it perfectly to that shape. So we are going to make our sun nice, happy, bright yellow. Move it up a little bit, change the size a little bit. But we also need some sun rays. And in you, if I were making this just as a standalone illustration, I would leave the sun rays as part of the sun layer. However, because I am going to animate it for a future class, I know that I want the sun rays to be on a separate layer because I want to be able to twist and make the sun rays bigger without necessarily changing the size of the sun's center. So I am going to create separate layers for both the sun and the sun rays. And to create my sun rays, I'm going to use the star tool. Typically, we think of stars as five-pointed things. However, if you just click in Illustrator on your screen, you'll get this dialog box. I'll be honest, I never really understand what radius 1 and radius 2 means, but I do understand what points means. Points is the number of points that your star has. For our sun, I would recommend choosing a number above 20. So I am going to choose 25 points for my sun. Whew. And that is tiny. I'm going to resize it, holding down the shift key so that it stays the same size. And I'm going to plop it behind my sun. I think I'm also going to change it so that the sun rays are orange. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Okay, if you remember in the original ocean illustration, we had a little bird flying around, and we are going to create that bird using the pencil tool. And it's a very simple process. We are just going to create a little V, and it would help if we actually saw that. When using the pencil tool, it's kind of really important to note if you have a fill or if you have a stroke. Because we are dealing with a line drawing, a fill doesn't necessarily make sense. I'm going to show you what a fill would do. A fill would try to create like that complete shape, right? It sees where I began my line, it sees where I ended my line, and it's trying to fill the entire thing. So I don't necessarily want a fill. I do want a stroke. And I want a fairly thick stroke, please. Thank you. And one thing to note about stroke, you can see here that our line just kind of ends, kind of horribly, in my opinion. We can change that by going to the stroke panel. And I just did that by clicking on that underlined stroke option. And this allows me to change the cap. So if I change it to a round cap, you can see that the point is no longer just a squared off edge. It's a nice round end. You can also change that for corner points. If maybe this V was too sharp, you can change the corners to be smooth. I think I do want my corners to stay pretty sharp. And some other options there as well. So just be aware, you can always change your stroke options by opening the stroke panel. Also, a fun note, you can also make this a dashed line. I do not want that, but you can. Okay. One thing about birds, though, is that they tend to have pretty thick centers, right? And pretty thin edges on their wings. So we are actually going to use the width tool, which looks like that. It looks like a squiggle with some more lines through it. I don't really know what the best way to explain that is. The width tool allows you to click on any line that you have selected, and it allows you to change the width of it. So I am clicking and dragging on the line, and by doing that, I am creating almost like anchor points, like an anchor handle. I am creating a line that says, I want the width at this point to be this wide. I do not want the point at that point to be that wide, actually. And I want that to be even thinner, please. Okay. And then I probably want the points at the very edges to almost disappear. There we go. Our bird now has a little bit of weight to him. One thing to note is that you can use this width tool on any shape. If we created a circle real quick, going to give it a stroke real quick. We could use this width tool to make almost like a peacock feather looking thing, right? So just an option to note about the width tool. You can use it on shapes, you can use it on lines. It's a really good way to add some variety into your design. Okay. Next up, we are going to create our boat. And I think I'm going to actually do that in this blank space over here. Our boat is going to use a lot of ellipses. And you're just going to have to bear with me as I create a bunch of ellipses. First up, I think that I'm going to create the bottom of the boat. I want to create kind of like that rounded hull, I guess, is the bottom of the boat. And then probably another ellipse to kind of give it a round lip. Okay. So the shape that I'm going for is this bottom shape. I don't really care about these two shapes up top here. But the reason why I created these two is because we are going to use something called the Shape Builder tool. And this creates new shapes by combining and erasing parts of simpler ones. So theoretically, with the Shape Builder tool, we can either hold down the plus, or we can hold down, no. If we just hover over the shape as normal, we see a plus icon in the bottom of the cursor. If we hold down the Alt key, we see a minus icon in the bottom of the cursor. And if I want to delete these two parts of the shape, I'm just holding down the Alt key and I drew a line through both of them. You can see I am left with my bottom of the boat. I want to add a bit of a I don't know what that word is in boats. I should have looked up some boat vocabulary before this class. But I hope that you know what I'm talking about, the part on the front of the ship, that part. And I am going to select both shapes, and I can do that either by clicking and dragging over both shapes and it selects them both, or I can individually click and then shift click on both. And that selects both shapes as well. And then I'm going to select the Shape Builder tool. And this time I'm going to draw a line through all three shapes to combine them. And there's my boat prow. I do want an outline on this ship. Oh, it would help if I had the selection tool selected. Okay. The other thing that we need on this ship is a mast. So once again, I am using the rounded rectangle tool. I am drawing. I'm using my selection tool and holding down the shift key to select both shapes. I'm using my shape builder tool and drawing a line through both to create one solid shape. And now we just need the sails. And for the sails, we are using more ellipses. So I think the boat we had was red. Maybe with kind of an orangish outline. And now the sails, well, we'll see what color they are. I want my sail to kind of billow out like it's being filled by the wind. And then I want it to kind of curve inward because it is attached to the mast. And then I want it to, that's what I want, but I want this a little bit more over here. So I hope that you see that shape that I just built. I'm looking for this sail shape specifically with my new ellipses. Actually, I think that I wanted a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. I wanted the top not to be so far above the bottom or so far to the right above the bottom. So with that, I'm going to select all three ellipses again, and using the Shape Builder tool, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to erase that part. And there is one of my sails. Probably want it to stick up just a little. Okay. In the bottom of the toolbar, I'm just going to swap this fill and stroke so that the sails are that orange color and the outline is that red color. And for the sail on this side, I want it to billow out a little bit. Kind of creating a similar shape again. I'm using the shift key, holding down the shift key and clicking on all three shapes to select them. And then once again, using the shape builder tool, holding down the Alt key to minus and erasing the parts that I don't want. And this sail isn't quite exactly what I had in mind. So I am going to use my, first I'm going to use the selection tool to make it a little bit taller because I realized I made it a little bit too short. And now I'm going to use my direct selection tool to move this anchor point. I am realizing that there are too many anchor points, so I'm actually going to delete this anchor point right here. And this anchor point, I am going to try to move like there. Delete that anchor point. Let's convert that. Okay, yeah. I want this bottom sail to have kind of like a swoopy edge. I don't know if that's how sails actually work. I'm sure it isn't. But this is an illustration. And it is what I want it to be. So I think that looks fairly good for our boat. One thing that I'm now realizing that I forgot to do is I forgot to put these on a separate layer. These are all still on our sky layer. So I'm going to create a new layer, call it boat. And if I select all the shapes of my boat, which I did by using the selection tool and kind of clicking and dragging over the empty part all over my shape, you'll see in our sky that it has selected these parts. I can then highlight these in the sky shape and click and drag them to my boat layer. And if we move our boat around, ooh, that boat is huge. That boat is huge. This is what I get for making the boat in a different area. So I'm going to group this shape. So right now we have three individual shapes, right? We have the boat with the front part and the mast, and then we have the two sails. I'm going to group all three of them together by holding down the shift key and selecting them all, and then going to object group, or you can just do Control G if you would prefer. And what this does is it allows me to just kind of click and drag it as one shape. I no longer have to select all three shapes individually. It's now one shape. And that means that it can all be resized as one shape. And that means we can move it around. I'm also going to give the boat just a little bit of an angle, like it's being rocked by the waves, tossed about. And there we have our boat. Okay. We are coming to the end of our beautiful illustration. And for this next part, we are going to create a mermaid, which I'm going to immediately create a new layer for. Mermaid. We could definitely draw a mermaid just using our pencil tool. It wouldn't be too terribly hard. We could also, build our mermaid out of shapes using the ellipse tool and using the shape builder tool like we have been. That said, Illustrator, Adobe is doing a lot of cutting edge technology to try to upgrade their software, and I want to highlight that. Right now, one thing that they've got going for them is in their panels, they have this text to vector graphic, and it's a beta feature, but it is available in Illustrator. And what this means is that we can type in mermaid, and Illustrator will try to draw us a mermaid. Now, it's not maybe necessarily the mermaid that we would think of, but it is a vector illustration of a mermaid, which is pretty impressive. So we would want to select our type. For this, I think subject works really great. We don't want a scene. We've already created the scene for the mermaid. We just want the mermaid herself. Styles, none. Settings, I have played around with this thing before, and I want minimal detail in the vector graphics. I think that the vector graphics it creates have too much detail. But then if you keep scrolling down, you get to this prompt. And in this prompt, you can type in mermaid jumping. And then you just hit that generate button. And it tries to fulfill your request, basically. And it takes it a while, but definitely sometimes shorter than what I could do. Okay, so here I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can actually see our mermaids. It's got some options for us. So either that kind of a mermaid, not bad. That kind of a mermaid, that kind of a mermaid. I'm leaning towards this almost angry looking mermaid. She has the least amount of white around her, and I like that. It also feels like it's going to be fairly easy for me to change it, which is what I really want to do. I want to make sure, yes, our mermaid is on the mermaid layer, which is great. And I am going to ungroup. And I am going to ungroup again. There's a lot of groups in here. Can I? Nope. Basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get rid of that white outline. And gosh, it is not wanting me to do that. Okay, delete. So finally, after ungrouping a lot of things, I was able to change that around. The other thing that I probably want to do is I just want to get rid of her face. I think her face is a little creepy. So I'm going to kind of create a circle around it. And using the shape builder tool, I'll be able to kind of combine all of these into one. Oh. Okay, and I can change this color again. into her skin color. And lovely, we have a mermaid with no face, but she looks fine. And in our little scene, I'm going to select all of the pieces of the mermaid layer by clicking on that circle next to the mermaid layer. And then I'm going to go to Object Group again to make them all into one. And I am going to resize her to make her a little bit smaller. She is very big compared to the boat right now. And she is just going to be kind of swimming in the back. So that's one way that you can generate graphics in Illustrator. Okay, finally, we are going to add our text that says travel. You can do that using the type tool. If you simply click, you should be able to type. And I can tell immediately that that is way too small. Luckily, Illustrator already kind of gives us a little menu option right here to change size. So I'm going to make it the biggest that it can be on that. And I'm going to make it even bigger in my options bar. One thing to note again is that I am in the wrong layer. Something that if you work in Illustrator a lot, you will appreciate very well organized layers. And you will learn better habits than I have learned. So I just quickly made a new layer for travel and dragged it up there. So now we have our text. We can change our text by going to this character menu and choosing from any one of the fonts that we have available. I personally like Chippewa Falls a lot, but all of these fonts that you have are the ones that are installed on your computer. Adobe has access to thousands of fonts, and you can find more. And it takes it a second because Adobe Fonts has, like I said, thousands of fonts. And with this Find More option, you have access to all of the fonts in Adobe's license. One thing to note is that when you are finding more, you might want to search by filter. Okay, I was hoping that it would at least show me the filters while it was loading. The filters allow you to search by features such as serif or sans serif font. It allows you to search by how bold you want the font to be. So there we go, classification. So maybe a sans serif, one with serifs, a slab serif. If you want something script and flowing, if you want like a handwritten thing, if you want something decorative looking, I'm going to look for decorative, and I'm going to look for bold. And, oh, that's an interesting font. When you find one that you like, you would none of these are fitting the theme that I want. You would hit this little cloud icon next to it to activate the font, and that would download the font onto your computer, and then you would be able to use it in your piece. So that said, I'm going to use my Chippewa Falls font. Clear all. And I'm going to change the font to be white. And there we go. We have our perfect little ocean scene. So now that we have come to the end of the class, we get to talk about different resources that the library has. We have a lot of resources for continuing to learn about Illustrator. If you go to planolibrary.org, you can click on this Research and Learn button, which will take you to our Research and Learn databases. And if you click on Business or Career, you'll have access to both LinkedIn Learning and Udemy. Both of these are video libraries that have thousands of on-demand video courses taught by professionals that are really high quality and include things such as learning the base, learning how to paint in acrylics, learning how to use Illustrator, learning how to code in Python. They range anything that you could possibly think to learn, they have it. If you're looking to learn marketing techniques, if you're looking to learn how to use social media, if you're looking to use anything, these definitely have something for you. I also wanted to mention our Plano Library Learns blog. It's planolibrarylearns.org. So if you go to tech, you can see that we have our digital creation spaces. We have been using Adobe Illustrator, which is part of the Adobe Creative Suite. Every library in Plano has an Adobe Creative computer, which has the full Adobe Creative Cloud suite on it that is available for public use with your library card. However, we also do have digital creation spaces at Parr Library, at Haggard Library, and at Harrington Library. And these libraries have these spaces that have multiple computers with the Adobe Creative Cloud suite on them. We also have things like microphones, cameras, Wacom tablets, various other things that you might need to use to create digitally. So if you have any questions about digital creation spaces, highly encourage you to ask those now. We have previously taught Illustrator basics, and if you go to our Plano Public Library YouTube, you are able to look at videos and previous live videos. And if you search, you can search for either Illustrator basics, or if you're interested in animating your ocean scene, like I have been mentioning, you can search for After Effects. So Illustrator, in the past, we have taught it using a mountain scene, and you can see how this would kind of teach you the same skills, but maybe you want to learn a new format to really follow along with. So I would encourage you to look at that. Alternatively, we also have other Illustrator courses, such as really diving into the type tool, really learning into the pen tool, different things like that. And then, of course, the After Effects basic motion graphics to learn how to animate our illustrations that we create in Illustrator. Back to our PowerPoint, we also have some upcoming programs that the library is sponsoring. We have Photopea coming up, which is kind of like Photoshop, but it's available for free online. And that is this coming, well, next Thursday, July 11th at 3 p.m. We have Unity Basics and Unreal Engine Basics. These are all about learning how to create graphics and really the game of video games. I will not be teaching that class, so I am not as familiar with those as I wish I would be, but our instructor, Jessica, is amazing, and I highly encourage you to check those out. We will also be teaching another After Effects basic motion graphics class if you would like to continue where we left off and animate your ocean scene. In person, we have Wacom Basics, which includes a digital visual display tablet that is pressure sensitive, so you can explore drawing using that and Photoshop at Haggard Library this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. And then in August, we will host Blender Basics at Haggard Library. And these will be ticketed programs at Haggard Library. So be sure to come 30 minutes before the class to get your free ticket.
We have a question, Anna.
Oh, okay, sure.
They're asking, are there any free versions of...
Sorry, you cut out. Are there any free versions of Illustrator? Is that
or Adobe
question?
apps? The Adobe.
You might find some that are rough approximations that can roughly do some of what Adobe software does. Unfortunately, Adobe really is the industry standard, and if you're looking to get into the creative design fields, it's almost a guarantee that you have to learn how to use Adobe. I wish that the Adobe subscription was less costly, but unfortunately it is what it is. There is Inkscape if you're looking for more vector graphic design. Inkscape is a free vector graphic program. And there's if you just Google like freeware for Adobe software, you'll get the most recent recommendations for the various products. But honestly, the softwares really just do a fraction of what Adobe does, and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality. Is there any other question?
No, but I also just want to
Okay.
remind you that you can use our Adobe software for free by coming into the library and using our Adobe computers or digital creation spaces. So that's
Yes.
the next best thing.
Yes. Free with your library card.
Exactly.
So if that is all, thank you very much for attending today's program. If you think of any questions later on, you are welcome to email me at annak@plano.gov. And I suppose I am also plugging the Plano Library Speaks podcast. We have a podcast. It's fun. Listen to it. Thank you, everyone.